Welcome back to the show, everybody. I am your host, Craig Pasta2GO, and this is my new show, Pasta2GO. Let's bring in Don DeBar right away. Don, how you doing today?
Doing all right. What's up, Pasta? How you doing?
Dude, I'm just doing it, man. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
Everybody on the show loves you. They say thank you for introducing us to Don DeBar. I announced the other day that you'll be going to Russia to observe those elections. It's very exciting. I wish I can go with you,
Me
but there'll
too.
be many more trips in the future. Wait a
Yeah.
minute, my piece went. There'll be many more trips in the future.
Yeah.
But listen, I want to get your opinion on this Tulsi situation because you know what I'm saying? I know we were going to talk about AFRICOM and
Yeah.
we're going
Yeah.
to talk about the new bases in Somalia, but I just brought it up here. Look at this right here, real quick. I'm going to play this full screen, Don. I
Go
want to
ahead.
get your opinion. This is Tulsi Gabbard who spoke today at CPAC, right?
Right.
And let's hear what she's got to say and then give us your opinion on her speaking at Mar-a-Lago.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Aloha. It's wonderful to see you all here again at such a critical time. Our democracy is under attack. The perpetrators of this attack are those who, in the name of saving our democracy, are destroying it. I don't use these words lightly. Every one of us who loves this country and who cherishes peace and freedom should be very alarmed by those who, driven by their insatiable hunger for power, are actively undermining all that we stand for. And almost every single day, if you're paying attention to the news and the headlines, there is some new assault and some new attack. Now, it's the Democrat elite and the swamp creatures in Washington who are doing all that they possibly can to keep us, the American people, from a very simple thing, having the freedom to choose who we want to be our next president. And it is clear through their actions they have no respect for us, and they have no respect for our fundamental rights as citizens of this democratic republic. They are so terrified that we, the people, may make what they think is the wrong choice. In the name of protecting democracy and saving us from ourselves, they're actually destroying our democracy and taking away our freedom. And we look throughout history and we can see many examples of evildoers who find some justification, who believe that they are doing the right thing. And so today we see the Democrat elite say with great concern in their voice that if the American people elect Donald Trump again, they warn us he will destroy our democracy. They say he will be the dictator in chief, that if he's elected, it will be the last election this country sees. Laughable. It is so crazy, it's laughable. But they're justifying their actions by telling themselves that they need to destroy our democracy in order to save it.
All right, Don, I got to bring you in really quickly to talk about this because there's certain things she's doing that is pretty funny, right? Like she's using certain language, evildoers. I mean, that was a buzzword for the conservatives for quite some time.
Yeah, pronounce it right. It's
But-
evildoers.
It's-
It's evildoers.
and the Democrat elites, right? Now it's not just elites across the board. It's not the establishment. It's Democrat elites. I mean, it is a CPAC crowd. What are your thoughts right away? Do you think that she is one of, I mean, I don't know if you saw the last segment. I saw you there. I hope you were listening, but she's going to speak at Mar-a-Lago. $12.50 a plate, baby. You know what I'm saying? Cheap price over there. But she's going to go speak in Mar-a-Lago. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think she's going to be the vice president pick or maybe secretary of defense? Your thoughts. And also your thoughts on her complete transformation to being a conservative now.
Well, my first thought at $12.50 a plate is an open bar, because if it's open bar, then I can make that work. The conversion of Tulsi Gabbard from whatever I guess people called her before, progressive, to conservative, is actually, it's a movement that one could achieve by standing still, because contextually everything shifted. Right is left, left is right. These things are they're not the same as they were 10 years ago, even. George Bush was on the right. God help us. John Kerry was on the left, according to the terms of the day. And now, Joe Biden is on the left and Donald Trump on the right. Do you want to have a war with Russia, Joe Biden or whoever is speaking into the microphone? Yes, of course. Trump, nah, it's a bad idea. What will they do in terms of policy? This is something else. We're just talking about, the visible shit show aspect of it. First of all, in my mind, the thing that has changed really is that it used to be that people who were actually of the left didn't play to this shit show. They looked at, as my grandmother would say, watch the hands. They would see what people were doing and they would deal with things, in those terms. You can't even credibly argue that Joe Biden is president right now. And so that raises for me the first question when we're talking in the context of who's saving whose democracy is if Joe Biden is not the actual president right now, who the hell is? And who elected them? How did they become president? Who is making war with Russia and rattling the bombs at China and making war on the Palestinian people and all of the other things that are going on this planet right now? Who is doing that stuff if it's not the guy that people think they elected? Cloud over the election or not? And by what mechanism? In other words, who really holds power? The levers of power that are available to the United States government are, they're unrivaled in history, unprecedented. And there is a mechanism as antiquated, as anti-democratic, as magical as it may appear, and as corrupt as it is at least a mechanism that you can point to. And so you can say, well, this policy came as a result of these people who attained power through these mechanisms. But we don't even have that where we can do a forensic like that at this point. The people who are occupying positions of power are completely invisible to us.
Yeah.
We get, we see
the shadow government, right?
Yeah,
It's there.
Shadow at best. I mean, shadows are visible at least. They may not be clear, but they're visible. I guess our shadows are Jake Sullivan, that whole legion of talking heads that go to State Department.
What do you think about Tulsi then? Do you think that she is, because people were saying, like, she's an honest player. She just can get things wrong. But she seemed to twist and turn a lot. She put on a pretty heavy pretzel move over here. Her glorifying and going down to Africa, which we're going to talk about AFRICOM next, right? Yeah. But she has talked about that, going after jihadists and radical groups out there and whatnot. But she knows damn well, and she said it before on the campaign trails, and she understood that the American foreign policy apparatus funded a lot of these groups. So was she playing the long game a long time ago, or is this her just now pandering to a crowd where she sees an opportunity?
Well, first of all, I don't know that it's possible to make that determination without a, crystal ball and a, spy satellite and, I don't know what else. And also that assumes a static model that she is what she was and she's unchanged and has had a steady, game running, as opposed to what's more likely for a lot of these politicians, completely situational response. Whatever is happening right now, what's the best thing in it for me? And that's what I'll do. So I can't answer that question in the way that it's framed. I can answer it, however, answering more or less what she was talking about, in terms of the, evildoers and all of that. And also connecting to AFRICOM. So, they're describing these new bases that they're going to build in Somalia. There's an article at responsiblestatecraft.org.
Yeah, right here.
The U.S. government's plan to train Somali security forces at the newly established military bases in 5 different parts of Somalia. There's a backdoor strategy not only to expand the U.S. military presence in Somalia, but to position the U.S. more assertively vis-a-vis the other powers in the region. You can read into that Russia and China, and by the way, the Africans themselves, who are asserting again their independence against European and American colonialism. And we've been seeing that particularly in the changes in and around ECOWAS in West Africa, beginning perhaps with what they call here a coup, with the national uprising in Niger, and that spread like wildfire around North and West Africa and sent the French running back home to Paris. And so they're talking about, this is something that's been ongoing back to at least the 2018 National Defense Authorization Act, that expanded the ability of the U.S. to wage war via surrogate forces in places where it has not formally declared war, with the broader objective of countering the influence of China and Russia in particular. In other words, there's an ongoing project to take not just the abuse of the Constitution that we use now to make war, where the Constitution provides that Congress has to declare war, and that has been slowly eroded to where they blow stuff up at will and litigate for a while until the war's over. And once in a while, the Supreme Court says, you probably shouldn't have done that. And then they do it again. That apparently is too restrictive for the president. And so under the NDAA in 2018, and since then, they've been carving out more and more space to say, well, it's not making war if we take over the military of Africa and then turn it against anyone else that dares to wash up on the shores, even though our interests would be served with our money, with our weapons killing our adversaries, quote unquote. It's not a declaration of war, and it doesn't require any affirmative act outside of funding from the U.S. government. This is the operating environment that she would be carving herself a position in. And until she starts talking about that, she's full of shit.
I agree. And I want to provide a little context really quickly. Jamie, if you can put me up a little bit bigger. The Black Agenda Report. We just showed this, by the way, what Don was talking about. The U.S. Inc.'s deal to build up 5 new bases in Somalia. But for those of us who've been paying attention to, this is by the Black Agenda Report. And this is by Glenn Ford and Neil Bailey. This is from 2018.
Nellie Bailey. Yeah.
Nellie Bailey. I'm sorry. Not Neely. Nellie Bailey.
And the late Glenn Ford.
God bless his soul. Yeah. Obama militarily occupied Africa. In the 8 years that Barack Obama was president, AFRICOM went from 3 military bases to 84. 3 to 84. The first African-American president in the United States, Barack Hussein Obama, went into Africa and loaded on up, spread his imperialism all over the continent known as Africa. On the continent, said Mr. Paul Pumphrey, the co-founder of Friends of the Congo, speaking at a conference against the U.S. and NATO bases in Dublin, Ireland. Between 1996 and 2006, the U.S.-backed regimes of Rwanda and Uganda, by UN estimates, killed over 6 million people in the Congo. And Don, that was to make sure that the country was destabilized. We can then extract all those rare minerals for pennies on the dollar, all the Western mining companies, take all that, all those raw materials for the 4th Industrial Revolution. And then people will say, oh, no, Donald Trump, though, he was okay. No, they had all these bases that Barack Obama had set up. He brought the drones over there, and then Donald Trump armed them. Remember this one over here? The U.S. is moving ahead with a $1 billion arm deal and sale to Morocco. The Trump administration is moving ahead with a $1 billion weapons sale to Morocco. Reuters news agency reported on Friday, a day after the United States announced that Morocco had agreed to normalize diplomatic ties with Israel. Citing unnamed sources familiar with the deal, Reuters said that the Trump administration sent a notification to Congress about the proposed arms sale. Now, the thing I want to point out, we could bring Don back to as well, there was an article not too long ago, several years ago, that when Congress learned that there were several thousand troops in Africa, they were stunned. They didn't even know what's going on. And this has been quietly happening under the nose of everybody right now for quite some time. We have been armed up to the T in Africa, and it's not just to get those raw materials, those rare minerals. It's to push back against countries like China and Russia that also have a lot of deals going on. So we're really turning that continent upside down. I mean, there's a bunch of children that are still working in the Congo to this day in the mines. They're not going to school. They're not properly getting fed. They're not having a good quality of life. They're children working, slaves in a mine, Don.
Yeah. Look, I don't know. People are familiar with the inauguration speech of John F. Kennedy. That's ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country and such. It was January 20th, 1961. That's when he was inaugurated as president. Dwight Eisenhower and Richard Nixon were president and vice president from January 20th, 1953 until that date that John Kennedy was sworn in. 3 days before Kennedy gave that speech, the U.S. government, CIA, and the Belgian security forces murdered the prime minister of Congo at the time, Patrice Lumumba, who was the first post-independence head of state in Congo after having thrown the Belgians out. The same minerals that they want now, particularly coltan, from Congo, which is the richest country by far in the world with that particular essential material. It makes your cell phones work, for example. The people of Congo decided, okay, well, now that we have this stuff, we're going to start using it to raise the level of development of our country and our education and our healthcare facilities and housing and everything else. That, of course, was unacceptable to the U.S. government in particular, and to the Belgians, who had murdered millions and millions of Congolese. There's a movie you should watch. What is it?
Rwanda?
What's it? White King, Red Blood, Black Death, or some such.
No, I heard about that movie too as well.
Yeah, because rubber was another thing. In any event, so there was engineered a secession. All of a sudden, there was an independence movement inside Congo for a part of Congo known as Katanga Province, which coincidentally was, as what's his name, Trump would say, that's where the coltan was. They wanted independence from Congo, and they looked to Belgium and the United States to sponsor that. That's how fortunate. And this is the context in which Patrice Lumumba was murdered, and they did a Jimmy Hoffa on him. His body was, mutilated and scattered to the four winds. And also, it took the life of Dag Hammarskjöld, who was the Secretary General of the United Nations, who originally was on the side, as this matter spun through the UN, of the U.S. and Belgium, and became so disgusted with when he saw what was actually happening, he went on a peace mission to try to put down the uprising in Katanga and reconcile the parties so that Congo would have its independence, remain intact, and be able to engage as a sovereign state. His plane went down in the middle of that process, and so that effort was put aside. In any event, since 1961, there has been war in Congo that's taken the lives of tens of millions of people. It's the bloodiest conflict that's been fought on this planet since that time, including Vietnam War and including all of the other wars that the U.S. has made, and it's not ever spoken about in this country, in the media, or anything else here. It's not covered like that at all. And so you have a history, the colonial period, the slave trade, all of the things that have happened between Europe, the United States, Africa, in the last 500 years or so. You started to see real uprisings and independence movements, come to fruition, particularly in the post-World War II period, in the chaos that ensued from the, breaking up of some of the colonial empires. And then a reassertion of colonial influence and power to a degree where they were like, okay, you can have political rights somewhat. We just want to keep extracting the goods and making money, to where the United States came up with a scheme to directly occupy Africa militarily on the cheap. This was established formally during the last year and a half of George Bush's term. They set up something called Africa Command. It's one of the commands of the U.S. military. You've got Southcom here. You've got the command that is sort of CENTCOM, they call it. It's the Central Command in Europe and Middle East, etc. And what is now AFRICOM was part of that. Actually, this was like the colonial world, the U.S. military occupation of it. They parceled out Africa as a separate entity to be occupied in a separate way by a separate subordinate command structure. And what they did was go from country to country and negotiate to establish military bases, and ultimately, in terms of anti-terror operations, which they suddenly needed, where these forces would either partner or be subordinate to American command and control.
Yeah.
Now, when Barack Obama was elected in November of 2008, the U.S. had, as you said, 3 military bases on the continent. No one wanted them.
Yeah.
And because any government that would acquiesce to it, the people would throw out. Everyone knew this. And you had Muammar Gaddafi, who was funding all kinds of independent development projects and infrastructure for Africa to achieve real economic independence, so they could deal with their role, that they inherited as a provider of raw materials and such, and do like was done with OPEC, for example, where they used that to fund their own development, to free themselves from the harness of that. And the same with Laurent Gbagbo, who was trying to organize for himself and the other former French colonies relief from the French Franc regime, which they were inherited when they obtained their quote unquote independence as part of the cost of independence, that our currency will be printed in Paris by the French. So this was the condition that existed when Obama took office January 20th, 2009. And by December of 2010, the war that had been going on almost since the day Obama took office resulted, and a presidential election that was intended to settle it was upturned by terrorist activity that was supported by the United States and the French, and resulted with the removal of Laurent Gbagbo, the elected president according to the law of that country, removal at gunpoint from the presidential palace, and the installation of a guy who came out of the IMF. That was December of 2010. February of 2011, suddenly Susan Rice is at the United Nations complaining about Gaddafi and the Libyan government are shooting civilians who were protesting and such. And by March 20th, Obama's on television announcing a bombing campaign against Libya that lasted 7 months. Ended up with the destruction of the infrastructure of the country, the removal of the government, the independent government, the Jamahiriya, the self-governing entity that governed Libya, the installation of a separate Al-Qaeda and other terrorist squads dividing the country up, and the murder of Muammar Gaddafi on YouTube by raping him with a bayonet.
You can't even say the slow systematic removal and destruction of Africa. It was done so quickly and so swiftly. And I think a lot of people turned the blind eye because this was an African-American president, and they didn't think to question him on this. And it happened just right under everybody's noses. I mean, when you talk about Libya, you went to Tripoli before. And I also want to point out the fact that Muammar Gaddafi wanted to start his own currency backed in gold, right? But it was one of the safest, awesomest places to go visit in Africa. People talked about Tripoli all the time. The quality of life for the people, what they did for a newly married couple, I think it was free water, free education, all these things that the state provided. It was amazing. All gone now. Now they have a slave trade in Libya, and Obama was behind it all.
So by October 20th, 2011, Libya war is over. By June 30th, 2012, 35 countries in Africa have correspondent relationships with, in other words, are tie their militaries into command and control arrangements with the U.S. military. In other words, America's first black president performed the ultimate act of servitude to white supremacy by delivering Africa to the military control of the United States.
And what do we have right now in front of us as well? You can see it's still going on. I mean, I think that some people found some form of like hope seeing a lot of these military coups, which seem to be representing more of the will of the people, getting rid of these puppets and these dictatorships, like in Niger and where else? There's a couple places.
Burkina Faso was all over.
Yeah,
and ultimately,
Burkina Faso, right?
Also, they're back in Cote d'Ivoire now too. Cote d'Ivoire is also, the people there are like, can we go back to being independent again? So yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon. Hey, look, people do not acquiesce, easily, and you can't oppress them forever without them, rising up again and again and again. And this is who we are. It's who our species. This is how we've survived every asshole dictator that ever showed his face to us over the history of time, since the first gorilla came down, beating his chest and took charge of the only banana tree in town. This is what we do.
This is what we always done, and we'll continue to do it since the birth of the United States. War is our business, baby. Yep. I'm here with Don DeBar. This is Pasta2GO. We're going to take one quick break. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, if you ever wondered the topic we're going to talk about, that why so many lawmakers in the United States just go along with the military-industrial complex, we're going to connect that dot for you when we come right back. Do us a favor, hit us a like, give us a share. Maybe you have a nickel to spare. Help us out. We got super chats. We got super rays. We got the whole 9 yards. We'll be right on back. Stay with us. Don DeBar, Pasta2GO. Last segment coming up. All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. I am your host, Craig Pasta Jardula. This is Pasta2GO, and we're finishing up today with the last segment. Now, earlier on the show, Angelica Duenas was here, and we talked about how all these lawmakers in the United States had dual citizenship with Israel, and the fact that they're just going in the bag for Israel, no matter what, funding them to the T, going along with whatever they say, fighting their regional wars. It's not America first, baby. It's Israel first. She said it was just a coincidence. She was joking around. Well, why do we have so many people from the military-industrial complex getting these Congress members to go along with their wars? Well, it says it right here. The arms industry owns Congress, and this is by Jacobin several years ago. The new $850 billion military budget, which the House just approved and the Senate will take up soon, is a giveaway to the arms industry. Is it a coincidence that House supporters of the bill got 7 times more money from the military contractors than their opponents? Maybe that's why they won. Big U.S. investors prop up the nuclear weapons industry. Why are people in the United States so quiet about it? Why are these stockholders so quiet about it? Well, a new report finds that the investments have increased in the last year, with some also profiting from more government spending. And that's in big U.S. investors propped up in New York and the nuclear industry. In 2023, the top 10 share and bondholders of nuclear weapons producing companies are all American firms. The firms, Vanguard Capital Group, State Street, BlackRock, Wellington Management, Fidelity Investments, Newport Group, Goad Capital Holdings, I hope I said that right, Bank of America, and Morgan Stanley held $327 billion in investments in nuclear weapons producing companies in 2023, an $18 billion increase from 2022. And this is from Responsible Statecraft. So not only that, we have shareholders, stakeholders, people who invest in the stock market. The majority of that money they're spending on nuclear weapons. So a lot of people here at home, and there's not a lot of people who are involved in the stock market, but everybody in the stock market seems to vote and has a say, and they're where a lot of money is coming from, part of that donor class. Well, they're making money off nuclear weapons. How about this? Nikki Haley, Sun & Wealth, rooted in weapons industry pro-war advocacy network. Well, what is her policy? What is her platform? War, 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 war. She wants war with Ukraine, with Russia, funding Ukraine. That is her policy, and she keeps on saying a win for Russia is a win for China. She's trying to tie it to the populist movement. Here she is. When America should deploy its armaments and forces to the conflicts around the globe. When? When should they? And how much of the American military intervention abroad is shaped by genuine humanitarian and U.S. interests versus the tangled web of foreign alliances, special interest groups, and defense contractors? These questions, which have long divided both major political parties, were on display in Milwaukee last night at the first Republican president debate as foreign policy loomed as the key point of contention. And that's from Lee Fang. Vivek Ramaswamy, remember that first debate? He was the only candidate directly against any escalation in the Ukraine-Russian war and against any additional U.S. funds, argued that the conflict represented another no-win war, like the wars in Iraq and Vietnam. But I bet you Vivek's for a war with China. And it is kind of crazy, whether it be genuine or not. He was the only one on that stage. And that first debate, all the other Republican candidates were pro-war. They wanted war with Russia, funding Ukraine. Why? Because they're bought off. The biotech investors favors a quick negotiated end to the fighting and alliance with Russia to help contain China against future aggression, as well as a greater focus on domestic issues such as immigration. Several candidates in contrast bitterly argued that supporting Ukraine is a moralistic necessity. It's got nothing to do with their pocketbook, ladies and gentlemen. It's about our morals and values. It's about spreading democracy. This is what it's about. What about this cuck over here, Senator Lindsey Graham, pro-war super PAC bankrolled by defense contractors? If I were a defense contractor, I'd be big time for Lindsey Graham because I've been forward-leaning on rebuilding our military, Graham says. He wants to continue to rebuild it. Remember what he said with Zelensky? Dead Russians, the best money ever spent. And he wants more war all the time. He wants to bomb Iran. Is it because he thinks it's the moral thing to do, or is it because his pockets are lined with cash from super PACs and the military-industrial complex? The super PAC supporting the presidential campaign of Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, raised $2.9 million through the end of June, a significant portion which came from defense contractors that stand to gain from Graham's advocacy for greater military intervention around the world and increased defense spending. As Graham tours the early primary states, he tells voters that he is running to boost U.S. defense spending. My goal is to make sure the next president of the United States and the generation of warfighters have the capability and the capacity to do the job required to keep us free, Graham said in South Carolina earlier this year. Graham's super PAC, called Security is Strength, received $500,000 from billionaire Ron Perlman, whose company McAndrews and Forbes owns AM General, the manufacturer of Humvees and other products for the military. In December last year, AM General won a $245.6 million contract with the Army. So what they do is they buy off the congressmen, they buy off the senators, they buy them all off across the board. Look at that face over there. And then these guys go and promote war. They try to sell it to the American people that what they're doing is for democracy, is for our freedom. It's an easy tie to make. You can see it in front of your face. They're paid off by the military-industrial complex at a high level. So what do they have to do? Their job is to get into Congress and promote and fund and fight to have more war. Don DeBar, let's bring you on in. It's right there. We see it in front of our very own eyes. The military-industrial complex, the AIPAC lobbyists. That's why we're always at a constant state of war. U.S. lawmakers, they're in the pockets, right? The manufacturers, the weapons manufacturers are in their pockets, Don. How can people not see this? All they have to do is go to Open Secrets to see who gets funded by what. And you can see the military-industrial complex has bought off the majority of Congress.
You have 535 federal legislators between the House and Senate sitting in Washington in the Capitol building. They manage a budget every year, the part that's visible above water in the daylight of sorts, diffuse as it may be, in the vicinity of $1 trillion a year, or more, 2 trillion, I guess, almost $1 trillion going for the military. The result of it, the impact on the ground, is a churn of tens of thousands of dead people every year, sometimes hundreds or even more than hundreds of thousands of dead people every year. But certainly, I would say at least 10 to 20 to 30,000 people every year for most of my lifetime, going back at least to the late 50s. The decision making is obviously influenced by the stock holdings of these 535 people, along with the stock holdings, I'm sure, of parts of the permanent ecology of the government. The staffers and the lifers in the military and intelligence agencies and such. The ownership is visible to any prying eye. You can find out what someone holds with a subpoena if you're the U.S. Attorney General or a state attorney general, as we see in New York, for example. And you can look rather deeply into people's finances if you have probable cause. And I would say what you just recited would provide much more probable cause than, say, Letitia James used to find out about several real estate deals Donald Trump did 20 years ago. Yet this never happens. What does happen is a guy who was president a minute ago and is out of favor with power. They are able to find the mechanisms to address their problem with him in our law using the investigative tools that people agree are allowed to be used, the discovery mechanisms and such in the courts, and then to prosecute and for example, strip somebody of $350 million, as one of several actions that are being taken publicly. The fact pattern underneath this thing of Trump's is the claim that, I don't know if it's 15, 20 years ago, in a loan application to borrow money against some of his properties, he overstated the value of the properties as collateral. Actually, what happens, that happens all the time when you make your application and the bank hires an appraiser and they make a determination of what it's worth, and then they fix how much they'll loan you against the value of the property. We think it's worth $100 million. We're willing to lend you $70 million. And that's how the transaction happens. Then, in these cases, after the fact, the mortgage was paid off under its terms. That's the end of the deal. This happens years ago. Somehow, the New York State Attorney General is able to take a look at those documents and find a contrary opinion with respect to the value of those properties at that time, and treat this as a high felony of, the highest order. And again, strip $300-400 million from someone. Why is it that not one of the 535 members of Congress who hold stock in Northrop and Grumman and all these other fucking corporations that have killed 30,000 people in Gaza alone in the last 4 months on television, not one of them can find a question to raise in the fucking media, let alone to drag somebody into court, say, open this stuff up, let's look at all of it. Why can't we look
Let me
at
pause. Let me stop you there 1 second. Why isn't the public caught on to this the way what you just said over there more than anything? Do you think because they just don't care? Do you think it's about our programming growing up, the way they teach us in school that, when we go around, all these other foreign interventions are about us going and fighting for human rights? We're showing up like Captain America fighting for democracy. Why haven't the people woke up to this right now? I mean, what you just explained right there, plain and simple. I mean, he paid back these loans. The deal should be done. But all these guys like Lindsey Graham, like Nikki Haley, who was broke at one point, and then all of a sudden she's on the board of all these defense contractors, right? And now she's making money hand over foot. She's got millions, and she's out there peddling war. Why can't Americans, citizens, the everyday citizens, make that connection?
Well, when I first started getting involved as a community activist, it was over development issues, over some projects near where I lived that I thought were going to gentrify the area, make it unaffordable for the people I knew that I grew up with and my parents grew up with and such. And so I started to try to organize, and I was wondering why it was that the infrastructure to defend against developers coming in and rearranging a whole community didn't really exist. And it felt like such a mismatch. And a couple of people that I knew, because I was in the real estate business for most of my career. I was in the title insurance business. So I had skills in that area, but this, like, I was just, why is it that nobody else sees this stuff? And someone told me a very simple fact that made it very clear. The developers go from community to community to community. It's like a traveling road show. They have their experts and they see how it's done in multiple places. We're in a fixed location. They come to us. I can maybe tell you how this developer is different from that one, but I don't know a damn thing about what they did in this place or that place or that place. And they do. They know all of the ground game. And we don't, because we only know a small piece of the ground. How many people do you know that understand the inner workings of a mortgage transaction? That's a very small set. How many of those people do you know understand macro politics, understand how Congress works, understand disclosure, understand discovery, understand what these different things that are going on television? How do they understand how to watch television and parts from that, what happened with Trump's case in New York, for example? It's like there's so many little moving parts that it's really hard to understand it unless somebody assembles it for you, because it's very easy to understand if you have all the parts in front of you.
Is this from what Carlin said years ago, the fact that they'll never fix education, and they teach us nada nowadays, where a lot of people will compare a high school diploma today as almost a middle school diploma, or a college degree today is worth a high school diploma when you got your diploma. And it's kind of what George Carlin said. The education is broken and will never be fixed because the ruling class doesn't want people who are capable of critical thinking to sit around the table and understand how they're being screwed. So they teach people just enough to push the buttons and push the brooms, but not anything deeper. Is that a byproduct of what's going on today?
Yeah.
Why people can't, connect the
Certainly.
dots?
I'm certain that's true. Listen, you could. There was an experiment done in this country in the post-war period. I don't know what the behind-the-scenes thinking was, but what was obvious was that a great deal of money was invested in education, in pure research, in expanding college availability to large chunks of the working class and poor, and they built, huge state university systems across the country, community colleges, all kinds of tech schools also, and a whole lot of working people and children of working people got a liberal arts education that never had, any idea of any of these sciences before, philosophy, history, and all these things, and suddenly had this information available to them with a working class perspective that they had as working class members. And what you saw was a civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, all kinds of, basically uprisings with people saying, oh shit, now I have a theory to understand what I'm looking at. I'm getting screwed. And somebody said, that's not good. All of a sudden the free tuition went away. All of the public aspects to this changed. Big money came in. The curriculum was changed. Now we're looking for engineers and mathematicians, not that there's anything wrong with that, but we don't want anyone thinking about, social issues, and we don't want anyone thinking about, unless it's like more along the lines of herd management that they like.
They don't want us thinking about foreign policy either, too, as well.
They don't want us thinking about shit other than what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
What job am I supposed to do today?
Yeah, plugged into the service industry. Don, that's about it for today. You got anything else to wrap it up? That's some amazing stuff over there. It's just, for me, the thing that you said that just really hits it home and hits it hard is like all these people that the Donald Trump thing. And once again, we're not Donald Trump people over here. We're not supporting the guy at all, But this whole case with Letitia, right? Is it Letitia James? I believe her name is. Yeah. Seeing that whole spectacle on court, which she did, but yet all these other people taking all this money from all these defense contractors. It's mind-boggling, right? Nobody's ever had to pay a price for the lies and the miscalculations of Iraq, setting the Middle East on fire, and I was on the Critical Hour today talking about, well, they have all these people out there, these donkeys who go around and peddle this information to the intelligence agencies, and then the intelligence agencies use it. But I think they know, these intelligence agencies, that they're getting wrong information. They're just using that information to obtain their goal, which is war, which is invasion, which is a security state. But then they can go back, well, with the case of Iraq, right? Well, the British gave us bad intelligence. You knew that intelligence was bad. You just used that to manufacture consent to go in there and remove Saddam Hussein because you wanted that oil. Oh, the Steele dossier, we got bad information. You knew it was fugazi, but you had a goal to obtain. So you used that because you can go back and say, hey, we were given bad information. You know what I'm saying? How can people not connect the dots here? We just showed you an article out there that showed that the opponents that were run in these primaries, in these elections, the ones that weren't funded by the military-industrial complex got 7 times less than those who took money from the military-industrial complex. They own Congress. So, when you see a donkey on TV who goes, I'm supporting Nikki Haley over here because she cares about the Ukraine war and Putin must be stopped. What's in his mind other than confirmation bias for red team, blue team? It's like the social engineers know exactly what buttons to push, which ways to twist the public, which ways to convince them. And you get this kind of like narcissistic choice by the people out there to go along with one side because it proves their theory that they're right. There are people out there who are still saying that that Donald Trump is an agent of Vladimir Putin with zero proof. Zero, Don.
Look, when you can only see the things that aren't there and not the things that are right in front of you, someone has achieved something remarkable. And it'd be useful to know who it is and how they do it, because it's obvious. It's like Congress itself. How many times do we have to say this? They have an approval rating, a positive approval rating varies between 8 and 20%, never over 20%.
Yeah.
And a reelection rate between 90 and 98%. Like, how the hell do they do that?
Well, elections.
And they call that, this is our democracy. We got to watch out for.
Selections. Yeah. No, I know. I hear you. Don, thank you so much for coming on there. It says, tell Don the last time he tried to audit.
I know.
Tell Don, this is from Gregory Walker on Rockfin. Guys, if you want to leave a super chat, please do so. It's active on Pasta2GO. It's first time in a while we've been able to get some monetization on YouTube. Tell Don the last time they tried to audit the military-industrial complex, a missile hit the Pentagon and
Yep.
killed the auditors, except for Rumsfeld. He was late
Oopsie-doo.
to that meeting. What are the odds, Don? He's talking about 9/11 over here.
Oopsie-doo.
Oopsie-doo. Well, what do you think the solution is to this problem before we get you out of here? Be brief about it, but is there something in the short term we could start to do other than watch shows like Don DeBar and Pasta2GO that can
Yeah,
get people's mind right, you know?
revolution. That's what it's going to take. I mean, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to organize it. I don't even know if I want to advocate it because the people are not ready, I think. But
Well, people aren't on the same page. They're still divided.
I'm just, look, I'm looking at history. How have people, unpainted themselves in this corner before? You either do a wall through or you walk right through the paint. And it just changed the conditions, basically. We're not going to vote our way out of it. Voting for yeah, you could vote for Trump or Biden or Bobby Kennedy or whoever else ends up on the ballot. It's not going to change a thing. It might be more entertaining if Trump were president and it might be interesting if Bobby Kennedy were president too, by the way. I would like to see some of the things that he promised to do happen if they were going to happen. But
it'd be really entertaining if Dr. Cornel West was president.
I don't want that kind of entertainment. I think it's degrading. And I'm sorry. I'm just watching this campaign, whether it's the way it's being presented or the way he's doing it or whatever. I feel really bad about it. Whatever it is, even if he were elected, it's not going to change anything. The government, the president doesn't run the government.
Yeah.
Ask Joe Biden. Send him up the stairs a couple times for, with notes to ask whoever he's being told what to do. If he makes it 3 times up there, then, it's so obvious that the president is not running the United States government that the idea of electing a new president is almost absurd facially. I know it's almost sacrilegious to say that in the view of some people. I know a lot of people have revised their understanding of what happened with the Black liberation movement in the United States and think that the entire purpose of it now has been achieved, which was to, get the vote for people, and that elections were at the center of it, and that was that. Certainly, it was an element of it when people were not allowed to vote and people were oppressed by the people that were in office. But I think it would be very difficult to argue that things have changed very much outside of almost the cosmetics of it. If the bulk of the people are being screwed, the identity of the local administrators of the screw is really irrelevant to the people. I can relate to you better as you screw me because you look more like I do than the last guy did. I think that's a really naive, I think it's a criminally naive approach to politics, particularly given what's actually happened as a consequence of it. So when I look at a guy named Langley, no shit, the General Langley is the African-American general who runs AFRICOM now. He is the viceroy of Africa, military viceroy of Africa, a Black American named Langley. I don't know. Do I need to write satire?
It writes itself, Don. It writes itself. Don, thank you so much for coming on today, dude. We really do appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, Don DeBar, Pasta2GO's #1 contributor. We love him. He makes great freaking meatballs, and he has awesome Chianti. We love you. I'll see you soon.
Okay, brother. Take it easy.
Definitely. Go check out his work here, ladies and gentlemen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much for coming on and watching us. We had over 200 people on the channel for the first time today watching us. Well, I mean, I think when we had Jimmy Dore and Sam Tripoli on, we had several hundred people on, but mostly people on Rumble. We were concentrating on Rumble that day, and that was before YouTube gave us monetization. Now we have monetization. We can make a few bucks. We can get our butts out the places we need to get to. There's a lot of elections I want to cover this year. I wasn't able to get to Russia, but Panama's coming up, Mexico's coming up, Venezuela's coming up. I want to get my boots on the ground and report to you on those elections and any other things. Plus, we have an election here in the United States. Now, listen, I know that a lot of you are screaming that elections don't mean anything. It's just elections. There's a lot of conversations that go on. Organizing comes along with elections. That's where a lot of organizing takes place. A lot of birth of organizations, organizing grassroots comes out of these elections. So, at the very least, we'll have a lot of conversations that we normally wouldn't have during election year because, unfortunately, that's the only time when people are paying attention. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back on Tuesday. I want to thank Jamie Cheese Slice on the ones and twos, Joey Yakuza, a.k.a. Joey Sakata. Thank you so much. SF monetized. Yay! Hashtag free Assange. Now, remember, they're not going after Julian Assange. They're just going after all of us, and they're using Julian Assange to get to us. That's it. We're saving this world one meal at a time. Fresh pasta. El Dante. Love it, brother. Love you, David Went. Thank you so much. That was awesome that you can leave us those super chats, guys. It means a lot to us. It really does help out the show. Rumble Rant. EJ Imagine. Sorry. Pasta, keep up the great work. Thank you so much. Keep up the love, guys. We do appreciate it. Anything on Rockfin? I think we had one on Rockfin. We already got it. Oh, Kemshwari Kate, remember when Tulsi was carrying around the book JFK and the Unspeakable? Why he died and why does it matter? I totally do remember that. And that's why I thought RFK was a shoo-in to get Tulsi Gabbard. Obviously, that's not the case, but who knows? What else we got? That's it for today. Oh, one more from James Boyajan. Thank you so much. The Convo Couch received a tip. The Convo Couch received some love. Pasta2GO received some love. Thank you so much for everybody who watched today. I can't thank you enough. Next week, we'll be releasing our Patreon and Locals program. We're going to have some fun things there. Keep an eye on the Twitter, guys. If you don't have my Twitter, go to the Pasta2GO show Twitter. We're going to release some food videos. I'm going to take you inside the kitchen. We're saving this world one meal at a time, but now it's time for Pasta to Go.